The sun rose over the frosted meadow, casting golden light on a peaceful blanket of snow. The woodland animals had been busy, building the finest snowman the forest had ever seen. With a shiny carrot nose, button eyes, and a red scarf borrowed from an old hiker's bag, the snowman stood proudly, surveying the world. But as the wind whistled through the trees, the snowman began to shiver. Brrr, why am I so cold? He wondered aloud, his button eyes widening in surprise. A little bunny named Sprig hopped into view, her ears twitching at the snowman's voice. Cold? You're made of snow. How can you feel chilly? She giggled. But the snowman's icy arms trembled as a particularly fierce gust of wind blew by. I don't know, but I can't stop shivering, he cried, his scarf flapping wildly. Sprig tilted her head, her curiosity piqued. Maybe you need a warm blanket, she suggested. The snowman brightened at the idea, unaware that his quest to get warm would soon lead to a series of slippery adventures. Sprig quickly scampered off to her burrow, returning moments later with a colorful patchwork blanket. Here you go, she chirped, draping it carefully around the snowman's shoulders. For a moment, the snowman sighed in relief. The blanket felt cozy against his frosty surface, and he stopped shivering. But then something strange happened. Tiny droplets began forming on his round belly. What's this? He asked, puzzled. The snowman gasped as he realized what was happening. I'm melting, he cried. Panicked, Sprig tugged the blanket away. But it was too late. His middle had turned into a slushy puddle. Just then, a sleek red fox named Ember sauntered up. What's all the fuss about? She asked, raising an eyebrow. Sprig explained the situation, and Ember smirked. Don't worry, we'll rebuild him. But next time, no blankets. The friends quickly got to work, rolling up fresh snow until the snowman was whole again. The snowman was grateful, but his shivers returned with a vengeance. Determined to help, Ember came up with a new idea. What you need is a nice, warm hat, she declared. She darted off to her den and returned with a woolly cap that had belonged to a lumberjack long ago. Ember placed it snugly on the snowman's head. At first it felt perfect. The snowman's shivers eased, and he smiled. But then the sun peeked out from behind the clouds, and things started to go wrong. As the hat radiated warmth, the snowman's head began to drip. A rivulet of water trickled down his button eyes, and his carrot nose wobbled precariously. Not again, he wailed. Sprig and Ember sprang into action, rescuing the hat before his entire head turned to mush. They quickly rebuilt him once more, but Ember scratched her head in frustration. There's got to be a way to keep you warm without turning you into a puddle, she muttered. The snowman sighed, wondering if he would ever find relief. The trio sat under the shade of a pine tree, brainstorming. What about a campfire? Sprig suggested. Campfires are warm and cozy. Ember's eyes sparkled at the idea. Brilliant! We'll make the perfect fire. The friends worked together, gathering twigs and pine cones. Once the fire was lit, the snowman cautiously inched closer. At first, the heat felt pleasant, and the snowman smiled. This might actually work, he said. But as the fire crackled and the warmth intensified, disaster struck. Steam began rising from the snowman's body, and soon water was pooling around his base. Stop the fire, he cried, backing away as fast as his icy legs could carry him. Sprig and Ember stomped out the flames, but the damage was done. His legs were gone, leaving him as a talking snowball. We're getting good at rebuilding you, Ember joked, trying to lighten the mood. But the snowman wasn't laughing. He was tired of melting, and his hope was starting to fade. Sprig had an epiphany as they worked to rebuild their frosty friend yet again. What if we made you an ice palace? It would keep you safe from the wind and the sun. The snowman's eyes lit up at the suggestion. That sounds wonderful, he said, clapping his twig hands. Ember agreed, and the three friends set to work. They used frozen branches, icicles, and compacted snow to build a glistening palace fit for a snow king. When it was finished, the snowman stepped inside and marveled at the beauty around him. The cold air inside the palace felt just right, and for the first time, he stopped shivering entirely. I think this might be the perfect solution, he exclaimed. Sprig and Ember cheered, proud of their creation. But the snowman didn't realize that staying inside the ice palace would bring its own challenges. At first, life in the ice palace was wonderful. The snowman didn't shiver, melt, or fear the sun. But as the days went by, he began to feel lonely. His friends would visit, but they couldn't stay long because the cold was too much for them. "It's just not the same without you here," he told Sprig and Ember one day. Sprig's nose twitched thoughtfully. "Maybe we can find a way to keep you warm outside the palace," she said. Ember nodded in agreement. "You shouldn't have to choose between staying warm and being with your friends." The snowman felt a glimmer of hope as his friends promised to come up with a new plan. He realized that the warmth he truly needed was the kind that came from being surrounded by the ones he cared about. As Sprig and Ember brainstormed, the snowman ventured out of his palace, determined to help. He noticed something sparkling in the distance and waddled over to investigate. It was a pile of shiny, reflective stones. Curious, he brought one back to his friends. "What do you think these are?" he asked. Ember's eyes widened. "Those are heat-reflecting stones. If we use them to build you a special coat, they might keep the warmth out instead of in." The trio set to work, carefully arranging the stones into a gleaming vest for the snowman. When it was finished, he slipped it on and braced himself. To his delight, the vest kept him perfectly cool without making him shiver. The snowman danced with joy, feeling like himself for the first time. "It's perfect," he exclaimed, hugging Sprig and Ember. His friends grinned, proud of their invention. Now, the snowman could stay outside with his friends, basking in their laughter and love without worrying about melting. As the winter days turned to nights and back again, the snowman learned that his warmth came not from blankets or fires, but from the kindness of his friends. Together, they shared endless adventures, proving that even the iciest hearts can feel the glow of friendship. And so, the snowman who couldn't stop melting found the one thing that kept him whole: the warmth of true friendship.